Welcome to Not Another Crochet video. Today we are going to crochet with some ribbon. Now at Hobby Lobby I bought this mixed ribbon scrap bundle, and I went ahead and I already connected all of the little scraps that it came with to make one ball of yarn. And then I am planning on just crocheting with this, making a rectangle. I think I'm going to do a double crochet, and I'm going to also use my 5mm hook. I think this hook will be the best since there's a bunch of different sizes. You can see this one is super thin, but then like this one is really thick, and I think my 5mm will be the best one, the smallest hook that I'll actually be able to like hook this ribbon and make a stitch with. And so my plan is to make a double crochet rectangle, fold it in half, and then use the big ribbon that it came with as like trim at the bottom of the bag, and then the remaining as the handle. I have no idea how big this is going to end up being since everything is such different sizes. I'm hoping to get a bag that will be similar to the size of this granny square, like basically what this is, where it's the one granny square on the one side and the other one on the back. So I'm hoping it'll be about this size and I can just fold it in half and then sew the sides together and then have the handle at the top. So that's the goal. So I'll go ahead and start working with this yarn or ribbon now, and we'll see how far we can get. So I'm only a couple stitches in, and I already think I'm going to change the stitch pattern I'm doing. I think I'm going to do a double crochet, a chain and skip a stitch, and then a double crochet, chain, skip a stitch, and kind of do like a double crochet moss stitch. I think that will let me use the most amount of ribbon and get further. That way it's not such a small little bag. Hopefully it can be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to undo these couple stitches and do that instead. Most of the ribbon that I'm using here was pretty easy to crochet with. This was the first one that I was like, oh no, maybe I might regret doing this, because that ribbon was pretty thick and it was kind of hard to crochet with the 5mm hook, but it ended up really not being that difficult, and I really struggled later. But right now, this part of the project was really easy. The only other ribbon that was a little difficult to work with was this one with the little pom-poms on it. Trying to crochet around the pom-poms and trying to pull the pom-poms through my stitches, that was a little difficult, but not impossible. So overall, still enjoyed working with it. This is how far I have gotten right now. I'm going to take a break and then come back to this. This one with all of the little pom-poms was a nightmare to crochet with. But I will leave it at this for now and be back later. So I forgot to hit record as soon as I got back and started crocheting, so I did get a couple of rows in. Those 2 or 3 rows that I did were no issues, everything went fine, but as you can see here, I started having some issues with this ribbon. Since it's so wiggly and thick, I tried using a bigger crochet hook and it wasn't working. The hook I first was using was a 10mm hook. And now you can see here, I'm using a super tiny hook. I'm using a 1.4mm hook. And that is what ended up working because I would just hook onto the little loops of the ribbon instead of the full ribbon itself. But since I dramatically changed my hook size, the stitches were like scrunching up everything. So I ended up having to add some extra like chains and stuff. You can see here I undid it and started doing it again because I realized it just wasn't going to end up being a square at the end. It was going to be all wonky. So I undid it and I added some extra chains so that the stitches were longer, but I was still able to work this ribbon in. The other thing that was really difficult with this ribbon was trying to figure out how to transfer from this really tiny hook back to my 5mm hook, because the ribbon that came after this one was a much thicker ribbon. And whenever I was connecting the ribbons, I thought that I would be able to just use a bigger crochet hook, so I thought it would be an easier transition into this thicker blue ribbon. But I ended up being wrong. I ended up getting it figured out at the end, so it was no issue, and it was almost smooth sailing from here. After this purple ribbon, the next ribbon was the next problem child. I thought I would be able to loop it with the 5mm hook. Then I tried doing the same thing that I did with that yellow ribbon with the small hook, and that wasn't working. So then I went back to the 10mm hook, and that one barely worked. It hurt my fingers so much trying to get this thick, stiff ribbon through those stitches. But I was able to get it to work, and you can see me questioning if that worked whenever I laid it flat, because I was like, is this actually turning out like a square, or is this just becoming such a weird shape because all these ribbons are so different? And then on this one, instead of working into the chain space, I worked into the chain itself, just trying to make things a little bit easier. And then this ribbon, I also had to change crochet hooks because it had those little roses on it. The 5mm hook was just too big of a hook to like pull it through. So I ended up using a 4mm hook. And I still had some issues with it, but nowhere near as much as like that pink braided ribbon or that yellow wiggly ribbon. And then this, I think, was the last ribbon that hurt my hands to work with. It was like this velvet ribbon, and I thought it was going to be nice to work with because I love working with the velvet yarn. But since this is actually ribbon, it's so much thicker than yarn, so it was kind of difficult. But other than that, I think that was the last one that gave me issues. it was pretty smooth sailing from here. You can see I tested to make sure it was laying flat, even though I had to pull on it a little bit so that it actually laid flat. But everything started working up much better here at the end. The only thing was I now realized I was not going to have enough ribbon to make a little bag. So while I was crocheting up this last row or two, I was like, oh man, I'm out of ribbon. I have to figure something else out. So I decided to do like a picture kind of thing instead, or a tapestry. So I have these wooden stakes that I kind of weave the ends of my square onto. It ended up not being too difficult to do that, and I just kind of went in one stitch, out the other, and then once I got it onto the stakes, I just kind of pulled it back and forth to make it into the shape that I wanted to. Because all of the yarns and ribbons were different thicknesses and I used 4 different crochet hooks on it, I did kind of have to stretch some parts of it out so that it would end up being a nice shape at the end. And I still wanted to incorporate the thicker ribbon that came with it. So after I got it to the shape I wanted it to be, I took the bigger ribbon and just kind of cut it so that I could glue it onto the sides so it could be like a little picture frame or border for it. So I didn't do any real measuring or anything. You can even see on that last cut, I cut it the wrong way, so then I had to cut it again, and I was really worried that I was not going to have enough ribbon, which I ended up having barely enough ribbon. I had, I think, just the bits that I cut off, those tiny little ends, that was all that I had left. So I cut the ribbons and then I just used my hot glue gun and glued them on, and you can see the finished result here. I am really happy with how it turned out. All of the different textures of all the different ribbon is so much fun. This color palette works very well together. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this ribbon tapestry.